I've been thinking a lot about free will. I watched Daniel Dennet's lecture on free will. I didn't like every part of his lecture, but I think he's going in the right direction. I think there's a lot of things that are tied up in this sort of debate, I don't know what to call it, but of choice, or what's a real choice, and something called a free choice. And how is that different from a normal choice? I think that there's, in a lot of the, I'm not sure to say a lot, but in some of the sort of trying to define or pin down these terms, they become very ill-defined. It seems weird, but trying to separate choice from free choice, or real choices. And Daniel Dennet makes a good point, I think, about how people think about magic. Right? There's magic, right? What we think of real magic is mystical and mysterious. But real magic, real magic, is based on illusions. And how when we actually encounter real magic and we figure out, oh, it's not real magic, we say, oh, well, that's not real magic, when it actually is the real magic. It's so funny, that we have what we consider real and not real is in essence backwards for magic, and I think the same thing kind of occurs when I think that's Daniel Dennet's point, is the same kind of mentality occurs when talking about free will and choice. Is that the real choice is kind of confused, and then when we actually say, oh, here's a real choice, we say, oh, that's not a real choice. Real choice is mysterious, mystical kind of thing. When real choice is actually not. A real choice seems mundane, but so what? That's the real thing. That should be the thing we embrace, not the false thing, in a sense. And the false things, the false choices, I don't know what else to call them, are really self-contradictory. They don't even make sense when you get right down to it. And this happened when talking about determinism. It never made sense to me why anyone would argue that non-determinism is needed for free will. If you really think about what non-determinism means, non-determinism simply means something is not determined. Right? Who I am right now would not be determined by my past, would not be determined by my experiences or anything. Okay? So that's one problem, right? What does it even mean to have an identity if I'm not determined by actually doing things, right? Actually having gone to school and worked through, we regard those kind of things as forming what a person is or who a person is. But if non-determinism has a part to play, then that means that those things don't determine who I am. In fact, nothing determines who I am. And that would be true even if you're talking about metaphysics or supernatural whatever, consciousness, right? Non-determinism, it has the same definition, right? Not determining what something is. And so no matter what you're talking about, if something determines who I am, even in some sort of mystical sense, and I shouldn't say mystical because that's mysterious, but even if something determines who I am in a way that we don't understand yet, then it would still fall into determinism, right? There's no way around that. And so, it's not just known determinism, it's all determinism falls into determinism. So if you want that kind of thing, you have to have determinism. Now, at a second level, when we say we make a choice, well, what does that even mean in a non-deterministic reality? How do I make a choice in non-deterministic reality? That implies that what I am, who I am, determines what choice I make. There's a direct connection to the choice I make based on who I am. And if there's non-deterministic things going on, then who I am does not determine my choice. In fact, my choice is not determined by anything. It's just there for no reason. And, this idea of free choice, right, as separate from a normal deterministic choice, I think is completely self-contradictory. What does that even mean, a free choice? Choice free of the thing making the choice? That doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, either a thing makes a choice or it doesn't make the choice. A choice doesn't just exist out there floating around somewhere. And so, in that sense, you need determinism too, right? For something to make a choice, you have to have determinism. I mean, otherwise it just doesn't make sense. You can't even define choice without determinism. It doesn't even make sense. And now after that, right, it's not just enough to make a choice, right? The choice has to do something, right? That's the whole point of making choices, is the choices determine something else, right? But again, if you're going to throw non-determinism back in here again, right, then that completely undermines the choice, right? What was the point of making a choice if it doesn't do anything, right? So you need determinism for choice to actually make sense to make a choice. So anyway, on all three counts, I see non-determinism as completely incompatible with free will, or any notion of choice making. And as Daniel Dennet argues, right, and I don't know, he didn't say it specifically, but not only is determinism compatible with free will, but it's a requirement, right? You need determinism. It's not just this, nuisance out there. That's what you have to have, and to have real choices is determinism, right? There's no other kind of choice out there, right? Because the only other option is non-deterministic choices, which doesn't even make sense. So, but you might still ask, well, what about the whole one future thing, right? If our reality is 100% deterministic, then we only have one future. So how do we choose from multiple futures if there aren't any multiple futures, right? And of course, Daniel Dennet kind of goes around in circles talking about, well, that's confusing two different kind of things. The futures we choose from in our mind are predictions. They're not actual futures, right? They're not actual possibilities. We simply use determinism to predict. Without determinism, predictions would be impossible. And so we have to have that to make the prediction, and then we choose which ones we want to do, and then we avoid all the other ones. As it says, we become good avoiders. We avoid the ones we don't choose. And that's what determines our future. And the consequence of that, then, is only having one future. That's not the thing you don't want. That's exactly the thing you do want. You want, you want your identity to be determined. You want your choices to be determined based on who you are. And you want your choices to actually determine something else. So at every point you want determinism. You can't then turn around and say, well, now that means that we don't have free will because everything's determined. That doesn't even make sense, right? That's exactly what you wanted in the first place. Or what you should want if you want free will. Real free will. Real choice is not, the mystical choice. Or the mystical free will. That doesn't even make sense. Real choices, real free will, the consequences of those are determinism and having one future, or one past, or however you want to look at it. Now going back to the analogy of magic, the mystical magic versus real magic, well, you say, well, real magic's an illusion, right? And so maybe the same thing, right, with choice is that there's the mystical choice, but that doesn't exist, and real choices are just an illusion. And I think that's doing a great disservice, because if you look at magic, imagine all of our technology, to someone who doesn't understand that technology, it appears to be magic because it's mysterious. And simply revealing, how it works, it doesn't take away from the usefulness of the technology. Well, the technology is not an illusion. What was an illusion is calling it magical or mysterious, right? That was the illusion, right? The technology is still technology. It's still what it is. It's not what it is now that you know how it works. And for me, it's the same thing for choice. a choice is now not a choice because we know how it works. It's just not mystical anymore. And so we just shouldn't place that mystical value on choice and say, well, choice is just an illusion now that we know how it works. No, it's not an illusion, exact opposite, right? Now we know how it works. And choice is probably the most powerful tool that we have, even more so than our technology, because choice is what we actually use, right? We are, in effect, the choices we make. So it's infinitely more powerful than our technology, more useful at least. And so just because we might know how choices, operate within us, doesn't mean they're not choices now. We just know how it works, just as we know how technology works, etc., etc. And then we can use that to make better choices, just as we've used our knowledge of technology to make better technology.